Question number 7, Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Building and Housing. In light of his claim the government has been systematically dismantling the urban limit, does his proposed national policy statement on urban development abolish Auckland's urban growth limit?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the government has systematically dismantled Auckland's urban limit, firstly with the special housing areas that allows new residential areas beyond the limit, secondly with the fast-track process for Auckland's new unitary plan that will permanently replace it, and thirdly with today's national policy statement that would make it impossible to recreate. Abolishing the urban limit is the easy bit. It is what rules and plans you replace it with matters, and that is what the independent hearings panel is doing with the unitary plan.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Why does his national policy statement endorse the approach of drip-feeding land when doing that in Auckland clearly just feeds the rampant property speculation? And why doesn't he just abolish the urban growth boundary?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
It's clear the member has not read the government's national policy statement. Secondly, the member pretends that if you just whip the metropolitan urban limit away, that's all you need to do. You have to answer the question beyond that MUL. What are the rules if somebody wants to build an apartment building? What are the rules if somebody wants to build a factory? What are the rules if somebody wants to build a house? And that's where the member continues to have sound bites rather than policies.
That hurt.
Order.
That hurt.
Order. Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How does he expect Auckland ratepayers to fund the $17 billion of infrastructure needed to support Auckland's growth when he's offered them nothing to fix that in his national policy statement?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
The reason the national policy statement does not answer the question as to who funds the infrastructure, because that would be outside the law of what you can do in a national policy statement, and that member would be the very first to criticise me if I started breaking the law. We did make changes to the Local Government Act in 2014. Interestingly, changes that the member opposed, but he's done so many flip-flops it doesn't surprise me. Those changes to the Local Government Act made it plain that the cost of infrastructure should be met by the developer that's selling the sections. And secondly, those changes enabled infrastructure agreements, and those infrastructure agreements allow innovative ideas like infrastructure bonds to be used.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Can he confirm that Auckland's draft unitary plan already includes demand assessments and staged injections of land supply, and that all of his huffing and puffing has come to nothing because his national policy statement is no different to what Auckland Council is already doing?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, it may have missed the member that the draft unitary plan currently has no legal effect. It's before an independent hearings panel, and I would urge that member to not make views around whether it's a good plan or a bad plan until the independent hearings panel has finished its job. What the government can do is make its expectations very clear, and that's what it's done with a national policy statement that requires Council to ensure there's adequate development capacity.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Why, after years of talking tough and blaming councils for expensive housing, 8 years after he promised a national policy statement in the National Party election manifesto, why isn't he embarrassed and humiliated that this is all he's got to show for it?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the member may be interested that the first urban development national policy statement was promised by one of his colleagues in 2001. 2001. I'd also say to the member, when he asks me to be bold, isn't it interesting that he challenges me to break the metropolitan limit? I bring legislation before this House with special housing areas to do just that. and he delays the legislation in the Parliament and argues against it at every stage through Parliament, and that just shows that member on housing has had every single position that the Kuma-centric could have invented.
Order. 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 We now move to question. Order. We now move to question number